Welcome to episode 25 of the Rockwell Barbell podcast. I have Justin Moore on with me, who's a really good friend of mine at this point. We originally started training together at a place that I trained at before Rockwell. And he's been training at Rockwell with me since the beginning, still does. And have Shara Miller on the podcast too, who's running all the stuff behind the screens for us. And it's crazy. I looked it up before we started today and I was like, man, today is episode 25. And I'm generally not a person who starts stuff and then stops things, but this has always been something that's been kind of on the back burner because life just kind of gets in the way and pandemics happen and, whatever. But it's cool to see this thing continue. And I'm like, man, I think we can keep this rolling and eventually get to 100.
I'm sure you're on the right path.
But yeah, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Super, super excited. So your title for work is that you are a local software developer, right?
Local first software developer. So local first software is sort of an emerging paradigm. It's sort of a harkening back to how software used to be. You used to install software on your computer and you mostly owned it. Mm-hmm. And you could control it kind of at will. More recently, with the sort of advent of the internet, you got a bunch of software products that came out that ran in the cloud. So that means like computers and data centers run by big enterprises like Google and Apple and Microsoft as well. So that brought a lot of conveniences. Mm-hmm. It's easier to jump onto a web page and use whatever kind of like if you're using like Shopify for the gym to sell products. It's easier to like jump onto a website and do whatever you need to do for your business if it's curating your shop or buying products. But one of the things that sort of takes away from the user is the ability to control the software themselves. So if a company goes out of business, and you see this happen a lot with even companies that don't go out of business, Google is pretty notorious for shutting down services. I think recently they announced that they're actually shutting down Google Podcasts, app,
we were just talking about that on our way over here today.
Yeah, they're probably going to roll it into some of their YouTube offerings, but software that's running in the cloud can kind of come and go, and users are kind of left holding the bag. Where's all the work that I spent my time?
It's kind of scary, actually, thinking about it. All that time and energy and more money you put into it, and now it's somewhere else or not at all.
Exactly. So local first software is really about trying to give users back control of their applications and their data.
So it's like the libertarian version of software development.
I don't follow the libertarian movement that close, so I don't want to offend any, but that's probably a fair assessment.
You're like, that's the first time I've ever thought about that. That's how dumb that statement is.
Not at all.
Okay, got you. So that's something that you transitioned into over like the last couple of years, or was that something you've been at it for a while, just so you can bring me and other people up to date on?
It's sort of an evolution that's happened over the last couple of years. I got interested in it when I started working at Microsoft a few years ago. I was working on a product called Fluid Framework. Less of a product, more of a library, an open source library that developers could use to integrate into apps to give you some sort of real-time collaboration features. So one of the things that was really hot was sort of real-time document editing. So say you and Chara are working together on the show notes for the podcast, and you might want to be in there like you would be in like a Google Doc or something, and editing in real time, and you can see what she's typing in, and she can see what you're typing in kind of immediately. It was a set of technologies that helped developers do that kind of thing. Gotcha. But I got really interested in sort of a friend of mine was doing an interview for a company that asked him a very technical interviews for software companies can range very widely in terms of difficulty and content. And they asked him what I thought was a really interesting and unfair question, which was like, how would you implement a system like that to do sort of document synchronization between different clients, using a very obscure technology that takes a lot of time to get right. And it's called CRDTs, conflict-free replicated data types, for anybody in the know. If you know, you know. And it's a very... It's simpler than some of the alternatives, like what Google Docs uses,
okay.
but it's not the kind of thing that I would expect to be able to give you a good answer to in a 1 hour interview.
Yeah.
How do you build this kind of technology? But it got me really interested in the subject, and that sort of leads you down this rabbit hole of how do you actually get all of your software to work offline.
Okay, so real quick, your friend had this interview.
Yeah.
So was he telling you about the interview, and then kind of explain that part of it, because I'm curious to see like what he told you, and then where your mind went with the information that you got, like, you know, because I thought that was kind of an important part, and I just don't want to skip over it.
Yeah. So there was not a whole lot of information that he gave me about the interview, but he just asked me the specific question that they asked, which was like, how would you design real-time collaboration?
He passed the interview question on to you.
On to me, sort of after the fact. He didn't get the job. He's very happy at his current at his current workplace.
I believe that.
But it just kind of I think they call it nerd sniping if you pose a question to a sufficiently nerdy individual that's difficult to answer. You can kind of get them to pull on that thread, kind of, even if they weren't intending to go down that direction.
Just for the hell of it, or
out of curiosity. Like,
okay.
You
Gotcha.
can't fight the curiosity to, I wonder how that does work.
I see. Okay, so then the question got passed to you.
Yeah.
And then, so where did you kind of go with that question, and as far as like getting into the local first side of things, like what process did you go down? Because I'm just curious to see like what did you do first? Like, were you just researching it?
I started with a bunch of research because I guess I was looking for, the answer that I gave to my friend was, you shouldn't try to develop your own CRDT system in-house because it will take too long, and you should just use something off the shelf. Like, and then I sort of went online to see kind of what options were out there, and there was some emerging. I guess it wasn't emerging, but it was starting to get sort of popularity. A library called YJS, which is developed by some German. I think he's a professor somewhere, and he developed this CRDT library for basically handling synchronization of these documents.
Gotcha.
Between different peers, and and he had a big long interview about how it was built, and it was interesting to me because it was just a single developer basically who had built this whole thing from scratch, and had done a bunch of research in the area, and sort of following him and some other folks in sort of the space that he was connecting with. I kind of just continued down the rabbit hole, and ultimately it kind of ends up in this local first.
So did you sorry to cut you off, did you realize that that there was like sort of that area that was kind of missing, like in development, when you started researching it? You're like, oh, I found this one guy and he seems to be doing this, but there's not a lot of other people that are doing it, or he's doing it but not the specific way that I imagine it could be done. Like, yeah,
I think that it was people were starting. It's still very early for that technology stack. Other approaches for synchronization have been used and are probably still more popular, but this one is supposed to be. It's actually easier to understand and scale. So some of the main competing alternative is a technique called operational transformation, OT. And so those systems are usually easier to get started with, but they're harder to evolve as you want to add more features. And if you're developing software and it's successful, your users always want more features. And so you kind of end up in this sort of diminishing returns on the investment in your technology because it's harder and harder to build more stuff on top.
So it's better to like really bust your chops in the beginning and go through all the pain.
Yeah.
So that you have control, and then not only control, but once everything gets up and rolling, you have all these options.
A little bit more flexibility in terms of what it can do.
Gotcha. So did you basically develop an app off of that? Or is that what you're in the process of now?
That's what I'm in the process of now. Specifically, I'm working on a bunch of infrastructure technology. I call it sort of a prosumer first database. Mm-hmm. So to unpack that a little bit, a prosumer is like a consumer. It's like your average user, only they tend to use their software in a professional setting. So they're a little bit higher up the value chain. They're willing to invest a little bit of money on the technology that they use.
Gotcha.
And then a database is just a place to put your data.
Gotcha.
And all applications tend to have some sort of database, but they're typically designed for enterprise use, mm-hmm. and they're not designed to be optimally used by an end user. And that's why all of your data ends up in the cloud.
Meaning that I probably wouldn't run into that product myself if I was just looking for something for the gym to use as a consumer. Right?
It depends. Okay. Like, so if you had sort of like a specific kind of scheduling software mm-hmm. that you might use for the trainers in the gym, that might be like a prosumer.
That makes sense. Okay. Sort of thing. Yeah, and so the one thing that kind of made me want to have you on the podcast was that originally when we first met to start training together, I always ask everyone, why are you here? Like, what's the reason that you want to train with me? Well, what are we going to get after? And I think it was on the information sheet that you wrote it. And
I think that is correct.
And you wrote on the information sheet that you wanted to live forever, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when I first read it, I didn't like laugh because I thought it was ridiculous, but I kind of chuckled for a second because I was like, well, that's just kind of like silly, like. But the funny thing is, at the time, I didn't realize that was something that I wanted. But just for the record, it is. Like, I do want to live forever. If I could have 10 lifetimes, I would.
Yeah.
Or more. But so when we actually sat down to meet and talk, I asked you about it, and you're like, no, I do want to live forever, and I want to do anything I can to try to like keep myself as good for as long as possible.
Right.
So that I'm assuming that if that technology ever.
We're not there today. We're probably not there in 50 years. We might not be there 100 years or ever. But, I want to give myself a shot.
Yeah. So that really struck a chord with me because once I realized that was something that you actually wanted, I was like, okay, well, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing in the gym, helps you strive towards that.
Yeah.
And, one of the parts of your sort of requests was that, you're like, I want to get in shape, I want to have better conditioning, I want to have more strength, more flexibility or whatever, but not at the cost of injury or not at the cost of me being a detriment to myself and not being able to live as long or, like ruin my joints or whatever. So that's kind of a big task to take on to a degree because, a lot of people, I think it's fair to say that in the past, especially like 70s, 80s, 90s or even early 2000s, it was like get in really good shape while you're in your prime. And whether people realize it or not, it was like whatever happens in that period of time happens, and then you just deal with it afterwards, So somewhere along the lines of like, 2005, 2010, 2015, that kind of shifted a little bit, and now people are genuinely more interested in taking care of themselves, plus whatever goals they have.
Okay.
But when you first came along, you were probably my first client that their main goal was like longevity above everything. I even had some older folks that their goal was like longevity, but they really, really wanted to lose weight more than that.
Oh.
Or they, or they like really wanted to like bench a certain amount of weight. You know what I mean? Or
interesting.
Someone wanted to have bigger arms, even if it meant elbow tendonitis, like above longevity,
Yeah.
So that definitely evolved me as a trainer because I had to learn how to make you progress in substantial ways but also make sure that you were staying mobile, staying flexible, staying injury free for the most part.
Well, I'm glad to hear that I was able to push you at least a fraction of the amount that you were constantly pushing me in the gym.
Yeah, and and it actually kind of helped me on the back end because I think when we met, I was probably maybe early 30s.
I think we're the same age, and I think that we were both 30.
Yeah, so over the course of us, knowing each other because I'm going to be 40 in February, as I came closer to getting 40, I started realizing like, man, shit kind of hurts sometimes now, right? Or I'll pay for stuff depending on what I do.
Yeah.
And I still do a lot of dumb stuff for the record, but there a lot more thought goes into it now as opposed to the past where I would just do it and make it happen.
Yeah.
So it actually kind of turned around and it helped me because a lot of the protocols that I researched or a lot of things that we did for your training through trial and error, because we did have a lot of trial and error.
It was a journey.
Yeah, especially the first couple of years, right? There was numerous times where we sat down and I was like, oh shit, man, Justin's going to fire me, dude. Today's the day. But Justin was polite enough to sit down and say, hey, like, this is the stuff I think is working really well. These are the things that aren't working that well. Like, what are we going to do about it? Or I have an idea that we could kind of lean into that direction. And I was open to it.
Something would have to go very wrong for me to fire you because I've been trying to sort of develop healthier habits for longer than we've been training, which is about a decade now, getting close to a decade.
Yep.
And this is the first thing that has worked. And so I think it was probably after the first or second year.
Yeah.
When we had the talk.
Yeah.
And like quitting was not an option.
Yeah.
Like I was in it. We just needed to figure out how.
Yeah, but I think it's really good to be able to feel comfortable enough to do that, and then it's also good for the person who's, quote unquote, in charge or whatever, to be able to hear that feedback. And that's, in my opinion, what makes you a good leader, or it makes you a good whatever it is that you do, is if you can't take criticism, especially from the people that you're actually working with.
Yeah.
It's like, good luck, But it helped me on the back end because I started applying a lot of those things to myself, but in powerlifting, not just in strength conditioning.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful. And, and then down the road, I realized that I was like, man, I'm actually really like Justin. I actually want to live forever too. What made me realize that I wanted to live forever was, I think probably when I got into my mid 30s and I was like, okay, I have a business now that is doing well, that makes me happy, and it makes a lot of other people happy. So I don't ever want that to go away. That was the beginning of it. And then I met Katie and developed like a really solid relationship that, it just like, changed my whole life. And now I'm like, okay, I don't want that to ever go away, and then, you start realizing like, man, every part of my life is generally pretty good. And I just want to hold on to that. And I don't think I have enough time on this planet with 90 years or 100 years to be like satisfied with all that I could do with my family, my girlfriend, wife, my friends' family, clients, the gym, jujitsu, whatever. Yeah. I'm sure you feel the same way about your work. Or
it's interesting. I feel like I came at it from almost the opposite direction. I was working sort of in this pseudo incubator in the merchandise mart, and it was in a startup that I had co-founded, but there was a bunch of other startups that were in the space as well. And a woman from one of the other startups is actually the woman who sent me down this longevity path. And she sort of shared some ideas from like Ray Kurzweil about sort of futurism and the coming singularity, which is like technology is going to develop so fast that we won't even be able to kind of see past the event horizon of the advent of AI and nanotechnology to understand how it's going to impact our lives. And it's going to just be a dramatic shift. And in sort of learning about that, I saw these people studying about how to increase lifespan for humans. And I thought about it in the perspective of my life. I've never had suicidal ideation. And so if there was an opportunity to live longer, I was going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't happy with where my life was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was actually kind of the kick in the butt for me to like work on my weight, work on loving the work that I do, and actually like trying to build a life that I would want to live forever, because the idea of living forever in the way that I was living before was not gonna do it.
Yeah, it really wasn't holding up.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me try to break that down really quick, because it sounded awesome, but I just want to make sure I understand it, and probably for other people listening too. So you were saying that technology is evolving at such a fast pace.
Surely you've seen it.
Yeah. But you were saying that it's evolving at such a fast pace that it's going to blow by us, essentially, right? But like, how does that relate to you wanting to live longer? Is that so that you can like, it doesn't go by you like a flash, like you can try to live longer into time in order so you can like evolve with technology? I know it's a very odd question, but I'm just trying to understand.
Not quite. It's to take a step back. Ray Kurzweil, he's a reasonably well-known futurist. He thinks about like how the future is going to be. He has sort of, I don't know that he coined it, but he popularized it, at least for me, this idea of the singularity, which is going to be some point in the future. And the singularity, I think it's really coming out of physics and black holes, which is maybe getting a little bit off track, but light doesn't come out of a black hole, which means that you can't really observe anything beyond. Like if you're looking at a black hole, you can't see anything past it or anything inside of it.
Okay.
And the sort of technological singularity is the same sort of idea, that technology is going to advance so fast that we can't predict how it's going to be. So you can't like perceive the future beyond some point in technological advancement.
Gotcha.
And it's some of the technological advancements are about longevity. And so some of the hypotheses are that we'll be able to reverse aging. And it's sort of out of that where I got sent down to longevity.
So when the idea crossed your mind that at some point we might be able to reverse aging, you were like, I need to try to take care of myself so that if we do reach that point in my lifetime, I have the option.
Even before, I knew that I wanted to have, I would take the option if it was available, but it was more, but there's also like an important piece about changing how I live so that I want to live forever. Investing time designing the kind of life that I would want to live forever. Because if living forever was an option, I was going to take it because I would never commit suicide.
Yeah. If that's not an option for you, then if
people are living forever, then I'm going to be living forever. And am I going to be living like this forever?
You don't want to be stuck with a shit life. We were talking about at the gym, and I don't know if it was our session or when it was, but I know that happened sometime in the last 6 months. We were just polling people at the gym one day. About, hey, if you had the option, would you live forever? And like almost every single person that I asked said no. And I think that you and I, as far as I know, are probably the people at the gym that do want to.
Rare minority.
Which is funny because, it's probably just a little bit out of ignorance, but in my mind, I was like, well, everyone probably wants to live forever, like what?
I guess I might have been a little surprised to hear, not in retrospect. In retrospect, I can appreciate that people talk about sort of that death makes things beautiful and beautiful. And certainly I appreciate like in a lot of contexts, constraints lead to creativity, and there's probably a lot of creativity that happens because people
that's true.
Fear their own mortality.
That's true.
Which is is good and great. But I guess one of the things is if you think about it's a sort of attitude shift. If you think about aging as just a disease instead of a necessary part of life, you wouldn't be satisfied. Oh, everybody gets the flu. You're just gonna have to deal with it, and eventually you're gonna get pneumonia, and it's probably gonna kill you. Humanity, in its ingenuity, tries to solve a lot of problems, especially like in medicine. And so, if there's an amount of sort of engineering leverage that you can get to sort of change the outcome that are introduced by nature, it's sort of phenomena that's introduced by nature, it stands to reason that you would try to overcome that.
We defy nature all the time. I mean, there's so many things that pop up that, will, as soon as possible, try to come up with a solution for it.
I don't want to sidetrack the conversation too much, but I think that there's also probably a lot of value system baggage that is attached to sort of the life cycle, and that we spiritualize death in a lot of ways to try to cope with it. And if you are if that is like an essential part of your belief system, it's probably pretty hard to wrap your head around. Okay, now we're gonna live forever. Some people are looking for like heaven as a goalpost is like a thing that motivates a lot of people. And if we're not gonna die, then sort of what happens to all sorts of value structures and institutions that we have built up?
Yeah, and also like this is a whole different podcast, I guess. But like I'm just wondering, like, where does that fit into spirituality? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, let's say like all of this stuff becomes possible, then because a lot of times you do right or wrong for certain reasons, and then if that goalpost gets pushed back, then your decision making might change. I don't know. That gets really weird. I like it though, but. But yeah, so, and then, in the whole anti-aging, chapter, throughout our training at the gym, we talk about a lot of stuff, right? We talk about current events, just, personal drama, whatever comes up, movies, right? Stocks, music, occasionally music, whatever. But one of the things that we do talk about, seems like it comes around on a regular basis, is supplements. Okay. Right. Yeah. And usually it's just like trading information, and usually I'm like, yo, what are you taking? Like, this is what I'm taking. This is what I'm taking right now.
I'm sure that many of your listeners have dabbled in the space more than I have, but I've got a few maybe exotic things that I've used.
Yeah, I kind of want to dive into that. The first thing I want to talk about is Elysium. Yes. Because I think that's probably one of the most relevant ones to the whole anti-aging, living forever conversation. Yeah. So why do you take Elysium? How did you kind of discover it? And what's been your experience with it so far? I'm also asking this personally too, because I am considering taking it. I have for a long time. Sure. And I just never pulled the trigger on it. But I just am curious, like, what are your thoughts on it? What has it done for you? What do you think it might be able to do for other people? And are there any other downsides that you're aware of? Okay.
All great questions. And I want to be crystal clear for audiences that I am not an expert. And
that's the disclaimer.
Yeah. I see supplements as a kind of at your own risk sort of thing. So definitely take everything here with a grain of salt. NAD plus, I'm forgetting the
it's actual like nitro.
It's nicotinamide.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Nicotinamide.
Let's see here.
Dinucleotide, I think maybe.
Let's see. I got you. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't see it on here. Sorry. But yeah, anyway.
NAD plus, if you search the internet for it, I'm sure you can find all sorts of rabbit holes to go down on the benefits and detriments of it. I think that my first exposure to sort of...
Oh, I got it. It's a nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide.
I think that there's an academic by the name of Dr. Sinclair. I'm forgetting his first name. He was doing, I think, research mostly on rats about the effect of NAD plus and maybe NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide.
Yeah, that seems to pop up too when you pull up NAD.
Yeah. Effects on rats, and I don't want to misquote his research, but I think what stands out in my mind is that old rats were starting to look young and like have younger physiology.
Gotcha.
You would see it in like cell repair as well.
Yeah.
And cells not entering senescence, I think, which is the state where cells in your body kind of die and just become junk, but they are still sort of stuck in your body, and your body's not cleaning them out. Yeah. And so that was interesting to me, because I think that ultimately staying healthy longer is what's going to give you the most opportunity to experience the benefits, the potential benefits of some singularity if we make it past whatever other existential crises are ahead of us.
Yeah.
But I was looking for just a product online, and one of it. This is very early. I think this is maybe.
You've been taking it for a while.
I've been taking it for like 8 years, and I actually don't take Elysium anymore.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I do take an NMN. Elysium is an NAD plus.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Thing, and now I just take an NMN.
Oh, okay, got it. So you switched over.
I did.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, go ahead.
But I think Elysium was one of the only companies at the time
originally that was doing it.
Yeah, that was making
Gotcha.
it.
What's been your experience with it? Anything notable that you notice on a daily basis, or since you've taken it till now, or is it just a preemptive? It seems really like the research is there.
Mostly preemptive. I don't know that the research there. This is like a stock market investment more than it is. This is not a money market fund. I am picking the hot. I'm going all in on Tesla.
I saw a video of a guy who I'm sure is like sponsored, by this company on the back end or something like that.
Okay.
But he's like a YouTube dude. And he was driving in his car talking about NAD. And he was like, me being a business guru, which like, whatever, I'm sure the guy is a business guru. But anyways, he was talking about, since he's been taking NAD, he's like, I have all these ideas constantly in my head, right, from every different direction, which like I can relate to that. Not that I'm like a business guru, but I have a lot of shit going on, and you do too, right? There's all these ideas and projects going on, and the same thing with Shara. Like, Shara has like my bullshit she's always helping me with, right? And then your actual job, and then your actual projects, right? And so the good thing about that is that you're actively pursuing things and you're being creative and you're building stuff. But the downside is that it can get really messy in your head, right? Mm-hmm. And there's just always this stuff constantly just buzzing. And what the guy was claiming is that when he takes NAD, he was saying that it makes him focus on the one or two things that he should focus on, and nothing else temporarily. It's not that stuff's gone. He's just saying that it clears everything out for him. Have you noticed anything like that? Or do you think that's BS?
That I would love if that were the case.
I had a feeling, but I don't take it.
Yeah,
I take a lot of shit. Like, I think we were talking the other day. Like, when I tell people what I take, it generally bums them out.
A lot of information.
Yeah, and I don't take any like illegal supplements. That's what I'm talking about. But it's just the amount and the volume. Mm-hmm. People are like, you drinking enough water? Are you sure that's okay for you? Like, have you gotten your blood checked? Are you sure you need all that shit?
Yeah.
And like, I do it intelligently. It's not like I'm just like going to Vitamin Shop and filling up a shopping cart full of shit and then coming home and downing it every night,
Sure.
I also take stuff based on what my body is telling me.
Yeah.
So if I take turmeric, right, and I take like the prescription on the bottle, if I feel like crap from training, because I train jiu-jitsu 4 days a week and I do powerlifting 4 days a week, I'll take a little extra turmeric that week if I need to.
Okay.
I don't do it every day, but I take what I feel like I need, without being excessive. But I was just curious if that was true what the guy was saying or not. But it sounds like it's more like a preemptive thing. Right?
Yeah. Here's the one bit of risk assessment that I would suggest anybody look into if they're
talking about the liver stuff.
I don't think I haven't heard about any specific liver stuff, but more recently, I think only within the last year, I think this same Dr. Sinclair and maybe some other people in the field have tried to get one or both of NAD plus and NMN classified as pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceutical grade, and so that you would need a prescription to get it, because there may be some evidence that it increases incidence of cancer in people, which is definitely not something to take lightly. I hesitate to even advocate for my position, which is maybe a bit of a fringe position. I think a lot of people get cancer these days.
Yeah.
And it seems as though there's some research by, I think it's Brett Weinstein, who is a evolutionary biologist. And he had done some research that ultimately shows that, like, he was doing a study on lab rats.
Yeah.
And long story short, telomeres, which are like the ends of cells, which, not cells, the ends of DNA, which they kind of moderate how much or how well a DNA will replicate.
Yeah.
Because you can get sort of problems like kind of like frayed edges in your hair.
Yeah.
The ends of your DNA don't actually contain that much useful information. So even if you fray the edges and aren't able to copy it correctly, you can still make a good cell from a bad copy. It seems like telomere length, the longer your telomeres are, the more your cells can divide. And so presumably the better your cell repair is and the healthier you will be for longer.
Gotcha.
But it's like on the opposite side of that coin, the longer your telomeres are, the more likely you're going to get cancer, because there will be mutations in the division of...
So like more opportunities, essentially, too.
So I am of the mind that it's kind of like either you die early or you get cancer, and it's kind of like a balancing act between.
That's really interesting, actually, because when I was the reason I was like the liver thing is because when I was looking it up yesterday, I was just looking it up to read about it, and also because I'd like to take it potentially, but there's always the side effects of things, and there's always like this could happen, that could happen. It doesn't mean it absolutely will, but it was saying something like there could be some kind of liver side effects depending on this or that. And the whole cancer thing is kind of interesting, because like you said, a lot of people get it, and I feel like especially in the last 10 years, it seems like it's become more common than not, either that or I'm just getting older. I don't know which, but
a mix of both, maybe.
But I kind of hear what you're saying, because it's like if I had to choose between living for a very long time and getting cancer, let's say, just like if we're just being crazy and say like I get cancer and I'm 120, right? Oh shit!
Whoops!
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But yeah, let's say I get cancer when I'm 120, right?
Yeah.
That sucks, but I'm 120.
Yeah.
Right.
And I posit that, let's say you got to 120 and you had cancer, the likelihood of there being a good intervention for cancer 80 years from now
True.
is And so my gamble is I'll bet on the cancer and try to extend the life in the meantime.
Yeah, and I guess the other argument would be like, what if it makes you get it early if you're already on set for it?
Sure.
But I guess that depends on a whole other slew of shit.
Pulling it back to again, I think it's Brett Weinstein. Brett Weinstein's research. His last name's Weinstein. I forget his first name. He's got a brother. He's got a brother in physics. And I can get the two of them confused. His research was about lab rats, and a funny thing seems to big air quotes for for the listeners. A funny thing seems to have happened where lab rats were all getting sourced from like the same one or two distributors, and they were creating conditions for these rats over decades where they did not there was like no predation. There was no predation, and it was like better for them, because we're experimenting on them, it was better for them to evolve to have excellent cell repair, because we're testing like cosmetics and stuff on them to see, is this safe to put on humans, and if it's not safe to put, they're getting burned by chemicals or whatever, and they have to repair themselves. And so it might be that they actually evolved to optimize for cell repair.
Gotcha.
But one of the things that he uncovered is that basically all lab rats at that time, I think they've changed the protocols now, but all lab rats at that time died of cancer. Without exception.
And like if you wait it long enough, however many years pass, there's going to be a point where
that was the cause of death was almost always cancer. And that's where he got into sort of this telomerase, like how the caps of your DNA sort of research. And so like they all had exceptionally long telomere chains. And so they kind of like evolved to get cancer and repair their cells very efficiently. And so it might be, I would suspect that it may have altered. You see a lot of studies like this thing might cause cancer. That thing might cause cancer.
Totally.
And if it is because they're testing on lab rats that have evolved to get cancer, it makes you wonder how good the experiments that drew those conclusions were. So we might be a little bit over-indexing on the things that cause cancer.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and as far as like the supplements go, like I said, I do take a lot of things. I also, do more activity than the average person, so that's kind of my excuse for doing that. But my ongoing joke with it, the first supplement that I probably ever took was like a protein shake, when I was like 20, and I was like, man, I want to get huge, and I was like reading all these bodybuilding magazines, not realizing like what these guys were taking behind the scenes. In
addition to,
and I was like, man, if I drink the protein that Ronnie Coleman drinks, you know what I mean?
You've got to get at least half as big.
For sure, so that's where it started. But even then, when I was, younger and dumber and just kind of like taking things in hopes of getting somewhere that, was kind of impossible without being on gear, I still knew in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, there's a high likelihood that this doesn't do a lot, but I'm going to take it in case it does, even if it's 10%. So I think as long as you're under the assumption that whatever you're taking is not going to be perfect, but it provides some kind of opportunity, for benefit, then I think it's worth taking, and I know that about every single supplement that I take. I don't think I take anything that I'm like, oh, it doesn't work at all, but I'm not thinking that every supplement is like life-changing.
That's going to be
But I will say that when I don't take my supplements, like if I run out of my multi or whatever, right? And I don't take it for a week, I absolutely notice a difference. And it's not a placebo thing either. It's like physically performance-based, how I work, like my day job, not just like physical activity. So I think there's a reason for taking all that stuff. If you have the opportunity to take it, as long as you're doing the research, I think that there's a huge benefit there.
So I do take a product. I'm sure a lot of people have heard sponsorships for this, Athletic Greens. I've been taking that.
You've been taking that for a bit too.
I've been taking that longer than I've known you.
Yeah.
So maybe 12 or 13 years.
Yes.
And definitely these days, if I run out, I do notice things are not working quite as well as...
Yeah. And that's not just performance-based either, right?
No,
that's
that was really just... I didn't eat well.
Yeah.
I was not eating well, and I just wanted to make sure that I had some sort of nutritional coverage.
I take a green supplement. I think it's probably not as hefty as Athletic Greens, for sure, but I take it because... There's some days that I'm light on the greens. There's some weeks where I just like can't take in as much or whatever. I get sidetracked with work.
Sure.
So I blast 4 pills in the morning and 4 pills at night, and it supposedly gives me millions of green, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just helping me out when I know that I can't follow through on my end with that kind of eating,
The only other sort of somewhat exotic thing that I'm taking, and something that I would probably... I would more easily endorse than like an NAD plus or an NMN is resveratrol.
Yeah.
Which is mostly an anti-inflammatory antioxidant, I think.
Dude, you're going to lose your mind.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Anti-inflammatory, sorry, finish that. I got
antioxidant. I think it's mostly antioxidant, actually.
Gotcha.
I think you get it from like the skins of blueberries. I think it is largely considered pretty much safe for anybody to take, and it's supposed to help on the longevity sort of.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is that also like a potential minor test boost?
So
is there some
I remember you asking me about this before, and I never looked into it. That for the listeners, it is never. My goals are really in terms of like health span. I've never really been that into like competing. You've tried to convince me to compete on a number of occasions, and I've declined.
I will continue that peer pressure.
So I'm not personally interested in testosterone enhancement or supplementation, and I also don't have any need to sort of make sure that I'm not doing it either. So I just haven't really. Followed that closely, but I do remember you mentioning that you saw something that might have suggested.
So the funny thing about that supplement is that, because I remember you recommended it to me, or maybe not recommended it, but I was asking you what you were taking and why, and it sounded pretty great. So I was like, I'll give that a run, and if there is like a test boost quality to it, like I'm not going to complain, because I am like that asshole, like. Like I don't do tests, but if something like boosts my test, I'm not like,
an angle,
But yeah, so the reason I kind of jumped up when you brought that up is because I was like, dude, this thing is like anti-inflammatory. I'm going to be killing it, right? And right around the time that I bought some and started taking it, I had just had like a really hard 3 weeks of jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And then I don't know what the reason was. I don't know if I just started feeling better physically or whatever, but I started pushing my lifting hard again.
Yeah.
Like and I always lift hard, but the last like 8 months, I've definitely lifted harder than I have in the last year and a half.
Okay.
I'm just physically in a position right now where I can thankfully do that again.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was like the increase in intensity in jiu-jitsu and increase in intensity in lifting, but about a week into taking resveratrol, my knees were killing me.
Okay.
Like, just like I could barely walk. I could barely stand. Like, I could barely squat. I don't know what was going on. So, again, placebo, I don't know. I have no idea. But the only thing I brought it down to is resveratrol. And I was like, dude, I'm cutting that out. I think it's a resveratrol.
It's got to be that, yeah.
What's weird about it, though, is that as soon as I cut it out, my knee pain went down like 80%. But it's supposed to be an anti-inflammatory, But
you'll have to fact check me on the it's definitely antioxidant.
Yeah.
I thought that it was anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, I don't know, but I thought I read that too.
Okay.
But then I thought, I was like, okay, well, if this thing that kind of boosts my tests a little bit, my recovery will be better, because usually that's the case. Like when people do TRT, they're not just doing TRT to like lift more weights or to have better sex drive or like whatever, look better or whatever. It's like also recovery. You can do more in a shorter period of time. If you squat, your legs aren't sore as bad for like
as long
72 hours. It might be like a day and a half or maybe even not at all. So I was really looking forward to that. But I think I'm going to give it another run at some point because I think that was just two really
there are other
things.
Environmental factors.
I don't think it was just that. So I'll probably have to do that again down the road. My physical therapist is going to fucking kill me for that because I'll be hollering there like, my knee. Becca, please fix my knee, but it's interesting. I'll have to give that a run maybe and, see how it goes. But I think that's kind of it for like the exotic supplements, right? And you don't really take much other than that. That's
a multivitamin, super B complex, nothing.
Yeah. And we were talking kind of like the last 2 weeks leading up to meeting today a lot about AI.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of dive into that because obviously for every person on the planet that has a phone, or a computer, at least has an idea what that might be. They've heard about it. They might not understand it. I don't understand it. But, I just wanted to get into that, kind of like what that means for everyday people, what that means to you, maybe even what it means to Shara. If she's like,
okay.
If she's, I know, I told her, I'm dragging you in on this shit.
Get ready.
But I wanted to dive into that a little bit. I mean, I know it's going to be a huge topic.
Yeah.
But,
I am not an expert, but I'll try to give a little bit of information that I've gleaned.
So I know you were kind of talking to me a little bit about like the search engine side about it and like what AI can do for search engines. And I think that's something that everyone uses, like business, not business, just your own general curiosity.
I think that businesses are only just now starting to incorporate it, and it'll be a process. You can think of it for anybody working typical enterprise office job. It's probably like video conferencing software. We're at the very early days. It's getting introduced, but it's probably not ubiquitous yet in any organization. But you're mentioning like search. I think that the most interesting things that are happening most recently are around a technology called LLMs, large language models. Mm-hmm. So what's a model? How does the sort of recent sort of innovations in machine learning are based on neural networks is what they call them. And I've never built one, so I'm just kind of talking about what I've read. You basically have a bunch of matrices, which are like lists of lists of lists. You have a bunch of lists of lists of lists, and you stack them on top of each other. And you feed data in the form of like numbers through these matrices.
Yep.
And you do computations on one set of matrices to figure out the numbers to plug into the next set of matrices, and then another set of computations. And this is called a neural network, or a deep neural network, typically, because of how many layers deep you go in these stacks of matrices and matrices and matrices.
Okay.
And so that's basically what the model part of LLM, large language models, are. Language is the data that they're actually feeding through these models. So I'm sure folks have heard at least a little bit about ChatGPT by the company OpenAI. They've got a product where you can feed a natural language prompt into their system and it will generate an answer in natural language, or I think in the next couple of weeks are going to deploy like image results. They'll be able to sort of generate new pictures from full text prompts. And they do this by having basically scanned all of the internet's history as of 2021, and so that's the language that is getting fed into this neural network to train the model. And it's big, and that's why it's large. Large language model. I think they use on the order of 1 trillion. They call them tokens, but you could think of them as words. 1 trillion words get pumped through this big neural network, and now you're able to type in a text box and get what looks like a reasonable answer to to whatever you might ask it.
There's not really a reasonable way to talk about this.
No, you're right. You're right. It's exactly what it is. The thing that I get wrapped up in is like how AI is now a buzzword when it's really not actual like AI, like sci-fi AI. And I don't know, just thinking about that a lot.
Yeah.
Where intelligence and even more sophisticated consciousness emerge, I think that we're still a long ways away from that point. Yeah. This is like a spell check or an autocomplete.
Yeah.
But a really, 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 really good one.
Yeah. The AI thing is kind of interesting because I think mainly for most people right now, it's a conversation piece.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can just say that word and then, you know, people are either like, they're like, whoa, dude, you know, like they've like
got thoughts.
Afraid of it, you know, which is like understandable, which I get that too.
Yeah.
I think everyone probably has a little bit of fear wrapped around that, right? I think you probably should. And then there's sort of like, that's above my pay grade reaction, you know, which like I can attest to that, you know. But then it's also like, if you really think about it, you're like, well, what can that do for me? You know, like how can I utilize that even like on a really low level?
Yeah.
So one day I got on ChatGPT.
Okay.
Because I had
Tell me about it.
Because I had an hour off, which, you know, I generally don't have that. Usually every day is kind of stacked end to end or whatever, and I just survive and then go on to the next day.
Yeah.
But I had an hour off, and I was like, all right, I want to like look up some things. I'll tell you why I actually had the idea to do that in the first place. Mm-hmm. But I was curious to see how I could make it work for me. So I just started entering in like random questions. And then the first time I entered a question in, I was like, whoa, this thing isn't stopping. Like it just kept going and going and going and going, which was cool. But I also didn't realize like how deep that can go. Yeah. And then also like you also see that there's like quality there and then like maybe not so great quality. It's just going to give you a plethora of like results. But anyways, what I realized in doing and putting that search in is that like I think sometimes, and I'm probably guilty of it too, when I thought of AI, I was like, okay, well, this is going to make people like really lazy, right? Because it's just going to do all this stuff for you, which is true. But I didn't really consider the part of it where when you search something, it's going to give you all the information. And then when you're sifting through it, you're actually thinking about what the information you're seeing means to you. Mm-hmm. So then it's like kind of sparking this creative process that you would not have otherwise if you didn't have all this information in front of you. You just have your initial assumption about what that might be, or you have no information at all because you don't know anything about it. So I thought that was kind of cool, and I wasn't expecting that at all. And it kind of brought me back to when I was in middle school, when the internet first was like a thing, you know, and our teacher explained what it was, and then we got on the computer for the first time. And I remember being just on the computer for an hour, just searching random shit. And I was so excited, and it kind of seems like this is like the beginning of the internet all over again in a different way, you know, and now you just want to get on there and find things out. You just want to spend time on the computer to see where it goes.
There's definitely, it has brought a new sort of vigor to interacting with computers. I think that one of the most interesting things that LLMs have brought is this, exactly what you're talking about, this new sort of interaction modality. Mm-hmm. Interacting with computers had been pretty stale for a long time, and now we're finally at the point where you can sort of fake just talking to the computer, like the Jetsons might have talked to Rosie, or like Iron Man is talking to Jarvis, and it's actually able to do synthesis of information that is significant and occasionally valuable. Okay. Google was a real innovator. I don't know if you remember the web before Google.
It's hard to actually think about that. Actually, now that
because you probably did not find much. You did not find much because
I actually can't even imagine it, which is really messed up to think about. Because I know that I spent a lot of time. I mean, I guess AOL Messenger is the first thing that comes to mind.
AOL was
like pre-Google, right? Kind of.
Yeah. AOL and Yahoo were very. Yahoo News. They had a lot of the web's content that people engaged with.
Yeah.
Until Google, and there are other companies,
I know
Alta
what you mean.
Vista, Ask Jeeves. I'm forgetting a bunch of them because
Ask
only
Jeeves
Google.
is like OG shit, dude. That's like,
Yeah.
Ask Jeeves is like the original Google. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of there are a bunch of search companies that were indexing the web, and ultimately indexing the web is what made it useful.
Yeah.
And as a result,
Yeah.
people learned to write search queries in this sort of a different kind of non-natural language dialect called search engine optimization.
Yeah.
And you sort of develop this sense for how is Google going to index the pages that have the answer to the question that I have, and how can I coax Google into giving me those pages. And so in a Google search box, you're not actually typing just the question that you have in mind. You've sort of done this translation step of translating the actual question that you have into a format that Google will understand how to give you a reasonable answer.
So instead of me asking you, what's a good restaurant in Chicago?
Yeah.
I go into the search box and I write good food Chicago. I would never say that to you.
Good food Chicago? Like,
That's kind of what you're saying, right? It's like I've already like preset the language that I'm going to put into that box, expecting certain results from it, right?
Right.
Okay.
And so now with this more recent set of large language models, you can actually just type in natural language the question that you actually have. And in addition to potentially linking you to other pages, it can also synthesize a bunch of information from those pages. You should probably fact check yourself.
You back that? You back that? Is that?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
100%.
Definitely check the references. There's a phenomenon called hallucination that these large language models will do, where they will. It does not seem that a lot of models have been trained how to just say that I don't know the answer to a question.
But they're not trained to do that?
Yeah, it will almost always give you an answer. And that answer might be made up.
So it is the reason that it doesn't give you an answer, is that because that kind of what's the word for it? It kind of does away with the process. Like are they not giving an answer just because they're choosing to not allow it to say I don't know? Or do you know what what would your guys' guess be about why it would not be able to give you an answer if it's not the correct one? Like, is that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I think you're thinking about it the wrong way, because what you're saying is like they'll give you an answer anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. So
But do they know it's the wrong answer?
Yeah, they'll give you a wrong answer simply because they're like, well, it's time to give answers, and even if the answer is wrong, it's an answer. It's not like he was saying, it's not trained to say. I'm not, like, the confidence in this answer isn't 100%, therefore omit it from what's being spat out at you when you type in your...
So is that someone choosing to make that service operate in that way? Or is that just like the downfall?
I think probably what happens is version 1, you're so pumped that it answers anything in natural language that you ship the thing.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not going to worry about that for right now.
Okay, later... we'll probably get much better sort of reins on the factuality of...
I gotcha. Okay, that makes... So is that AI prompting? Is that what you just been explaining the last like 5 minutes or so?
The prompt is what you type into the chat box.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. And so like we've talked a little bit before the podcast about sort of like value design.
Yeah.
And I think you probably were the first person that I ever... had heard that mentioned to me before. So I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit.
I can tie it in.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, certainly 6 months ago, I think the existential terrors were higher than perhaps they are today. But maybe I'm in the wrong circles.
Terrors? Terrors like threats?
Just like people worried about the threat of extinction caused by AI. Definitely there was a lot of talk about it, I feel like, in the second quarter. I feel like there's a little bit less these days, but there are... there's so many things to unpack here. First off, I think that we're a long ways away before AIs are intelligent enough to destroy humanity without humanity's help. Like right now, I think what we really need to be worried about is sort of like disinformation campaigns and mostly disinformation campaigns. It will be really easy. We're going to the opportunity to lose the sense for what is real and what is true with some of the newer technologies like deepfake videos. They can actually start to generate videos of you probably want to do prominent people or politicians, and they never did this thing, but you're able to generate a video of them doing or saying a thing, and you put that online, and social media gets a hold of it. And
well, it's kind of scary because, I mean, even in the last, say, 5 years, there's been, people like that are influential, just their opinions or what they think or what they do or say, causes a whole plethora of reactions from people, right? On like either side, any direction. And then that affects how people treat each other.
Yes.
Right? And that's just like a tweet.
Yeah.
Like that's not like a system, that's like putting together this like spider web of bullshit, right? To attack from all angles at all times. So it's kind of scary to think about that, as far as like how society works or doesn't work.
So if you are the kind of person to get worried, don't worry about Terminators as much as you worry about sort of the dissolution of a shared understanding of truth and reality. That's where it's gonna hit us first. But it one of the challenges I think that exists today, there had been earlier in the year sort of a call to like pause AI development while we figure out some of the regulatory measures that could be put in place to try to mitigate some of the effects of this new technology. It's really powerful. I don't think that we will slow down, and I don't think that we can slow down because of what our societies at large value. And a lot of it comes down to it's hard for me to articulate because I don't think that it's kind of written down anywhere. Though it probably should be, and I'll get to that in a moment. But it probably has to do with like expedience and power and being the first and best. And certainly some countries in the West are worried about some countries outside of the West, and they want to make sure that they're at the technological forefront of this technology, and so they feel compelled to push the technology ever and ever more powerful. And the same is coming from any other party out there, and so you end up in sort of this prisoner's dilemma situation because of a lack of trust and a lack of shared understanding and commitment to values that would let us coexist. So recently I've been thinking about values a little bit differently for myself, and I've got this adage that I'm working on, which is that how is it? Food nourishes a person, and values nourish a people. And what that means is like while you are what you eat, it's like we, the society, are what we value collectively. And I don't think that a lot of people think about what their values are concretely. And I'm starting to write mine down so I can evaluate them and see are they good. Like I think about nutrition. When I started working out with you, my nutrition wasn't great. And this is like in my late 20s. I hadn't really thought about like what is motivating the decisions behind my nutrition. Why do I eat what I eat? And at the time, it was mostly convenience and taste. And to a lesser degree, cost. But there's a different set of motivators that you might choose in terms of what you eat
Yeah.
to have different, better, healthier outcomes.
Yep.
And so I've started to think about my values in sort of the same lens as nutrition. Like, what are the things that I value? Why do I value them? Is it the kind of thing that is going to lead to the sorts of outcomes that I want to have?
Yeah.
And so one of my more recent, I think I'm trying to develop a set of foundational values on top of which I can build more reasonable ones. And I think the first one is certainly value design in and of itself. Like I think a lot of people probably don't think about designing their values for an outcome. And so that has to be kind of an important part of the layer. You want your values to be durable.
Yeah.
And I would say, I think about like virality. You want your values to spread. Because I think that you see, this is a tricky one. This is a tricky one because you can get into a situation, a lot of things that spread are not good.
Yeah, I kind of know. I think I know where you're going with this.
Top among them might be viruses. The recent pandemic we just had is, I think, a good example of a thing that spreads rapidly, but it's not necessarily for good. And so, too, a lot of things on social media, maybe it's not the best for humanity at large, but there is a quality to it. I think outrage culture comes to mind in particular. Things that generate more outrage are more likely to spread. And there's something about looking at things that are effective, even if they're not good. You look at a thing that's effective, even if it's not good, and you try to figure out, is there a piece of this thing that I can use to leverage to get the same effectiveness, but to a different end? And I think virality is part of it. So you want to design your values to spread. And I think part of that comes down to memes, which is like memes spread rapidly and far. And sometimes they're for good, sometimes they're not for good. But having short phrases that you can say, like, you are what you eat, we are what we value. Like, that's an easy thing to just kind of like, and make somebody think about and sort of like become an earworm. So you want durability because your values have to last. If it doesn't last, it doesn't matter. You want it to spread. And then you want a thing that I'm calling coexisting capacity. If you value design and value redesign, it's very likely that different people are going to have different values. I think that we observe that in the world, even in the absence of value design. How can you create a system of values that lets people with slightly varying values still coexist? And that raises a question about sort of what qualifies as a valid existential crisis. Like, you don't want to cause existential crises for other people or other communities because there's no way that you can coexist if there's a valid existential crisis. Yeah,
totally. And the other thing that kind of comes to mind too is my mind is just like all over the place when I'm explaining this because there's a lot of parts to it.
I'm sorry it's so long. I didn't have time to make it short.
No, it's fantastic, but it's just one of the things that came to mind is that right now there's a lot of like sort of social disagreements, right? About like how things should be and who can do this and who can't, and like who do we protect, who do we not protect? Each side feels like
they're under attack
or whatever. At the end of the day, though, it's like everyone kind of wants the same things. You know what I mean? Like whatever vehicle you use to get there, at the end of the day, in their home, they want the same stuff. So as far as like the value design and value redesign, it's like there should be a commonality there. And I think it boils down to like what you're talking about, where it's like, how do you put together those values and like how do you rate those values every day? And like what's important to you? And are people even thinking about it? Period, are they getting caught up in the culture that they're a part of? Or
I think
that I know is sketchy conversation, but
I think that that's very much the case. I think that most people probably don't. And you tell me, like how many people outside of the gym are thinking about nutrition?
Oh, I mean, it's probably a very small amount.
Like,
you know,
like
I mean,
5-10% of
Yeah.
people, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, on a serious level, on like a life-changing level,
Yeah.
probably very few. You know, if you just drive around the city, you know, and look at
If we went around and asked people like, how long do you want to live? What do you think about nutrition? Who's really
like
thinking
talk to me about your macros for the day. You know what I mean? And like no offense, but most people don't probably know what that means and couldn't explain to you what macros are. You know,
And I imagine the same is true for like values. I feel like I think about values a lot, and I have not.
Yeah.
I'm only just now, like in the last couple of years, starting to actually write them down.
Yeah.
And try to commit to them and revise them and like evaluate, like, is this actually working?
Yeah.
And so I think that most people just sort of inherit their values like they inherit whatever diet they kind of grew up with.
Sure.
They grew up in that home and they ate a certain thing and they just kind of continue to eat that thing.
Well, I think it's kind of punishing to a degree to like think about those things and consider those things on a regular basis, because it's cool to get started on it, you know, but then when you get started on it, you inherently kind of get lost on that journey of figuring out what that is. You know what I mean? And that's hard on its own, and I think it'd be discouraging, you know. So I think you kind of need to just be open to like kind of adjusting it on a regular basis as time goes on, rather than looking for, you know what I mean, like one solid answer.
Yeah.
In the first year that you're considering that shit.
I guess that's the last couple of like foundational ones for me are introspection and then skepticism of absolutism, because I'm probably gonna get it wrong. I'm gonna get it wrong for many versions. I might never get it right, but so expect to have to check in with your values on a periodic basis and see, like, sometimes the environment changes. I think that some values that may make sense, some of the values that we could have today that would be optimal in today's world wouldn't have worked 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
1,000 years ago, your family just would not have made it.
Yeah.
But we've got opportunity now to recognize that in the same way, like 1,000 years ago, you probably couldn't choose your macros. You couldn't just you're just like eating whatever. Well, I didn't starve today. That's good.
Yeah, you're like, you know what? I actually can't have that carb right now. I'm a little low on protein, and I'm good on carbs. They're like, well, you're gonna fucking die because that's all you get for the next 5 days, man.
Right. So I think that we're we've got an opportunity now to look at values differently than maybe we have in the past, and actually take more ownership of them and actually design them for a purpose.
Yeah. I remember when I brought up value design to you like a couple weeks ago, because I think I had just given Shara like a small snippet. I was like, Justin's gonna get on here and talk about a bunch of wild shit. Like, right?
Perfect.
I think exactly.
I mean, that's typically what happens.
Which is the whole reason, you know, that I wanted to have you on here. But anyway, so when I told Shara that, I said, you know, here's like a little snippet about kind of what he wants to talk about. And I wanted to see if you had any like different perspective on value design, or if there's anything from like
let's hear it.
Come here for homework. I'm still thinking about it.
But just from like, you know, from your perspective, what you do for work and, you know, the tech side of things, you know, because the reason it sort of ties into tech for me is that we spend so much of our time on computers, on our phones, and we're very like wired into that now. So I wanted to just see if there was anything that you thought about that side of things that, you know, you wanted to bring to the table. And if there's nothing, that's totally fine. But
just a second, because with the whole for me, the whole idea of values, I think it's more of a personal thing than a tech thing, and that reverberates, you know, beyond your own person.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about, like, as you were talking, I started thinking about like the shitty values I used to have when I was younger. I was awful, and how I grew as a person. And while I didn't write down any of my values or even thought about it in that context, it was more of a, wow, I'm not a shitty person now. Sorry, I'm swearing too much.
There's a no swearing channel. We're going to lose the clean rating.
We're still good. I'm a better person now than I was before. And I started just thinking, like collecting in my head, like, what about me and now my values, now that you've mentioned it and how
articulated it in that,
like, what can I trace my history, my history of values back to where I started, like that point where I felt like I was an awful person, to now, and like what does that mean? Can I even chart it? Should I even bother? Should I just start with building like my, I don't want to say value philosophy because that's not what you said. That's how I'm thinking of it.
No, it's
Building that that log now as in my current state, or should I try to like go deeper into like my past self and also like see what's there? Like I guess where do I even begin if I wanted to start like practicing the idea of like recording my values and revising them and thinking about them? Like, is it worth going back into the past?
so I'm going to give you two answers.
Okay.
And the first, with a preface, I am not a good historian.
Okay.
I've never been good at history. I've never been super interested in history.
Yeah.
But a lot of people that I respect are like, you should read history. And they would probably say it is probably worthwhile to take a look back at what happened. But I think that it would be, if that's too much work, I think that focusing on on sort of the future and where you're forecasting your values to be and sort of how they will evolve from this point is a valuable exercise in and of itself.
Yeah, and I kind of relate to what you're talking about with like, you're like a kid, then you're a teenager, then you're an adult, and at some point in your adult life, you kind of just like reflect back on, let's say the last 10 years or whatever, and you're like, okay, well that worked, but it's not really ideal as far as like the way that I was brought up, whether that's your parents or whether that's like your belief system or just like being a good person as opposed to a bad person. And just making that conscious choice or whatever. And I feel like, at least for myself, when I went through that period of time, it was more like decisions based on survival. Whatever that, let's say for me, probably 18 to like 35 or no, 18 to 30-ish, something like that, we'll say. And then there was a point in time where I didn't have to focus on survival, and I could actually think about like, okay, how do I operate in day-to-day life? And does this actually check out with like the first, 15 years of my life where I was influenced by people that really like wanted good for me, and set me on this path to do good for myself and then also to be good for other people. So I had to revert back and like dig back through history and figure out like, okay, what was that thing supposed to be? And then how do I like apply it now to who I am? But I missed like, maybe almost 15 years of opportunity to do that. So I had to like relearn shit that I knew as a kid as an adult.
Right. Yeah.
But I think you have to like consciously make that decision to want to do that. You know what I mean? And how people get there, I don't know. I think my life just got good enough. I'm not even going to say it just got great. It was just good enough to be able to like consider that shit. But if your life's not good enough to consider it, then I don't know if you'll ever really get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you're struggling to figure out where your next meal's gonna come from, you probably don't have the bandwidth to.
Hell no.
And 1,000 years ago, everybody was like
that. Yeah.
These days, some of us have a little bit more free time, free energy. Yeah. And I think that. I hesitate to go even deeper on this, but I think about sort of people are worried about the existential crises of AI, and while I think that it'll be a long while before AI is sentient or conscious or motivated enough to try to do anything disadvantageous for humanity without humanity actually telling it to do that in the first place. But one of the things that I think that a lot of people value these days is expedience over benevolence. And I think about I had hoped that we would do a lot of AI research mostly on another planet, so that it's spun out of control. It's on another planet, and so we've still got Earth, and we don't have to worry too much. And if it's got Mars, I mean that's cool. You can have Mars. We screwed up that experiment, but that's fine. But because if I always thought that like if an artificial intelligence got super intelligent, it would probably figure out how to get off the planet faster than us. Mm-hmm. Because you always want redundancy in your systems. You always want redundancy in your systems. And I'd hope that it would do so without kind of wiping out life on Earth as we know it, or at least human life. But that was probably a bad assumption, because we, being the most intelligent species on the planet, aren't really paying that same respect to less intelligent life forms on the planet. Mm-hmm. Like, you could think if instead of trying to develop AI or genetic engineering or nuclear technology advancements or bioweapons, if we invested more of our economy into getting off the planet and cultivating another planet so that we didn't have to we're impacting like basically every other life form on the planet right now. If we weren't so motivated by expedience and urgency and more motivated by benevolence, we might try to leave the Earth as like almost like a forest preserve, for lack of a better term. Yeah. There's things here. We don't have to destroy the whole thing. We could go somewhere else if we put the leverage into actually trying to get there.
Maybe destroy half of Earth and half of another planet. For the better good.
No.
But I think that probably until our values change such that we behave in the way that we would want AI to behave, we'll probably never develop an AI ourselves that would be as humanitarian as optimists might hope.
Yeah, that's a wild thing to think about, actually. I don't think I've really thought about AI in that sense. Like, I've only thought about it being like, this is really awesome. It could do a lot of things for us, and it could get out of control if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And it's like, it also could get out of control because we're the people that we are,
it's going to learn from us
the technology
initially.
Side of shit,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. And so like with the idea of maybe going to a different planet, right?
Okay.
Like you were saying that if something goes wrong with it, it could be there, right? Like if we really fully experimented it. And there was like a joke that before we got on today, and I think it was maybe you that said it, but you were like, no, if shit goes wrong, it needs to happen right here. Is that you said? And you were like, we
made our bed and we'll sleep in it.
But I think you kind of said that more out of like just frustration with people, with kind of how we are in general, and it's like, if something goes awry with this, then it's like, well, we had a lot of opportunities to steer this thing correct. Not just AI and shit, but like ourselves. You know what I mean? Like we had so many opportunities that we just pass up every day just because we're like, nah.
I see it. I've got an analogy I'm working on. Like humanity has climbed higher than any other species in the known universe, as far as we know. Like we're kind of at the peak. But we are doing it free solo. We're doing it free solo, and it probably makes sense not to climb too much higher unless we get some redundant safety factors in place.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Before we get too much further along, I wanted to talk about the philosophy of building. And we were kind of getting into that the other day when we were chatting a little bit, and we were just sort of like briefly interviewing each other on like why we want to do things. And what would you say that your main philosophy is behind whether it's a startup or the like local first software, whatever it may be, whatever it is that you're into. I know that a while ago we were talking about like music algorithms. You're kind of like studying that a little bit.
What is it called? The technique is collaborative filtering for like music recommendation engines, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that motivates, I think, a willingness to live forever. Like a lot of people aren't. I'm willing to live forever because I very rarely get bored because there's so much to learn about how things work.
Yeah.
And so any opportunity that I can like really dive deep and kind of like figure out almost from first principles how's the thing constructed? Why is it constructed this way? What other parts of the design space could have been explored in order to make it potentially better, or what are the effects of one or another thing? And I feel like I could do that forever. Like there's so much about even just physics and science that escapes my understanding now, and I would just dump time into understanding all of the physics and all of the engineering and the things that we rely on every day.
Yeah, and I think like us knowing each other as long as we have, we know that there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences.
Yeah,
and it's kind of funny because sometimes our end goal is similar, but like how we want to get there or what we're doing on in the process of it is like not exactly the same.
For sure.
And I remember when you were asking me about that the other day, you're like, well, why do you do things that you do, as far as work goes or interests that you have?
Yeah.
For me, it's always what the thing does. You know what I mean? And I am curious about what happens, on the way there, and obviously I think there's better processes than not, but I'm always just really curious to see what the outcome will be. And I get a lot of joy from whatever the outcome is. So put the gym together and then you see people in the building and you see people working out and you know what the result is for those people. I get really excited from that and then really happy seeing that happen over and over on a daily basis. So my philosophy behind building is just, I guess, the struggle of, going through discomfort and pain and frustration and dark times to get to that happy point.
The grind, yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoy that a lot. And obviously, I hate it just as much as the other person when I'm doing it, but the end result makes me want to do it again over and over, and I think you might relate to this, maybe not, but being someone who's had a startup or, worked for a major company, same thing with you. I'm sure maybe you can get down with it too, but you kind of develop a sense of confidence in like, okay, if one thing worked once, then everything I do after there will work too.
Yeah.
And I had to learn the hard way that that's not the case, but the nice thing about that is that when you realize that just because you do something good one time, it doesn't repeat, then you have to work really hard and go through all that pain to get that to work again in a different way. And that's been really enjoyable for me in the last 10 years, sorry, go ahead.
It's interesting that you bring that up because kind of on top of my foundation of values, I've got one of the key values that I'm sort of refining a bit, but I think this is the one, is don't value what you have, don't value what you are, but value what you can repeatably do.
Yeah.
And it reminds me kind of of what you're saying, where you did it once, that's great, and then maybe you try it again and maybe it's not. Yeah. It doesn't quite work out that way, but you learn a lot in the process, and if you can get to the point where you can repeatably execute on a thing, I think that's really where sort of the knowledge and the confidence and everything good comes out of that.
I did have a question for you about, you're involved in a lot of different facets in life, so you have your tech side of your life, your main job. Like I joked around about earlier, you have the Rockwell side of stuff that you're always involved with me. Yeah. Earlier today, I picked you up from, she was taking a print class in Ravenswood just to learn how to use some wild Japanese printer for a zine, that you want to do. But
risograph printer.
Like a periodical, paper printing.
Yeah, it's paper printing. Okay. It's humongous office machine, and you have humongous little ink cylinders. You have to switch out the ink cylinders, and they only come in one color, and you have to basically run multiple prints of something in order to have it print
render
it
in
you want.
the right
so
color.
Like you would have to like take that, put it into Photoshop, chop it up into like CYMK channels, and then run it through the printer for each like channel, color channel. Basically.
So what's the benefit of printing like that? Is it printing quality, or is it print in a way that other printers can't print in that like unique fashion? Or what's the...
What if I just told you it's because it looks cool? It's legitimately just because it looks cool.
That's kind of what I was asking. But yeah, what's the reason for you to like be involved in different things continuously? Because it's, like even like photographing bands at shows, like, but like, do you know if the answer to that? Is there a certain thing that you like enjoy from being involved in those different facets of your life that is repetitive, or do you think it's more random or whatever that you're like, oh, I just kind of like that, or I'm curious about that?
A lot of it's just me keeping myself from being bored, because when I get bored, I think about awful things. I'll say that, to put it extremely simply. And not even awful things as in like I want to jump off of like a bridge or something. It's more of a, just being trapped in a rut, and then I get kind of like upset that I'm not doing something, but I also don't want to do too much. See, I have to have a balance, because there's a difference between
burnout
what you do, which is everything, and then what I do, which is not everything, because you're busy forever. And I imagine there's a lot of people like that, but I just need to do just enough to keep myself like stimulated, or else I'll just play games all day, like video games, and I don't want to. And even that with video games, I still try to find interesting things to try just I gotta keep busy.
No, I think that's totally true. Like we've said numerous times, like I am really, really busy, right, for the most part. But, even the little bit of downtime I have, if I'm eating food, or if I'm just like laying in bed before I crash out for like 5 minutes or whatever, if I spend too much time on my phone, or just too much time thinking, even if I'm not on my phone, and I'm just thinking, about random shit, generally it doesn't go to good places, and it's just small things for me. So like the other day at the Jiu-Jitsu Academy, there's just a doorway that's not finished, right? And it's a part of the build out for the academy and the new side of the gym that I just never got around to, because it wasn't like make or break for things to operate. It doesn't look nice, but people can still walk through that doorway. It's safe. It holds the building up, like everything around it is done. The floor is done, the walls, everything. It looks fine. But I finally decided to get around to it, and just being out there with a hammer and a saw and like being active for an hour and a half thinking about a mundane task just made me so happy that I reminded myself, I'm like, you need to find things like this more often. That's not really work related. It's not really like a task that you have to do for someone else that they know that you're going to get it done or not get it done. And I feel like it just kind of keeps my mind busy enough to where I'm not allowing myself to be on my phone. Like, what do you call it? Like rage scrolling or whatever. Like,
doom scrolling, maybe.
Or, you know what I mean? Just getting too involved in shit that I can't control. You know what I mean? Or worrying about things that like I literally won't be able to affect the outcome of at all. So I definitely can relate to that. And it just makes you, you're essentially just building your resume. Like what kind of things are you able to do? And I feel like sometimes that can get curbed pretty hard at like 30 for a lot of people. Not everyone, but I feel like a lot of people, their ability to add new skills or new tools, it kind of drops off after college or maybe after 30 or 40. And I want to continue getting better at things as I get older. Like
keep the neuroplasticity as high as possible.
So, and we were briefly talking about nutrition too a little bit, and kind of the joke with you and I is that like we said before, we do want to live forever.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say for probably both of us that we always don't eat like that.
Not necessarily.
But I make attempts. I can honestly say I make attempts on a regular basis to try to keep that controlled to a degree. I think, like you were mentioning earlier, convenience is probably the hardest part for me.
Hardest hurdle to kind of...
Yeah, Katie and kind of everyone I know just makes fun of me because I don't really give a shit about food. I'm learning to over time. Like I'm starting to figure out like what are really good restaurants to go to, and like what is a steak supposed to taste like downtown as opposed to like a Jewel steak. You know?
Yeah.
But for me, food has always just been, what does it do for me? And like, does it keep me healthy enough to like lift better or to, feel better or look better or whatever? and I'm slowly but surely figuring out what flavor is and all that, you know. But,
Okay.
but you know, like for me, it comes down to convenience. So if I'm busy and my schedule's pushed to like the max, that's usually when I'll start falling off a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's really just based on schedule demands for the most part, but I always try to return back to the way that I believe I should be eating based on how I feel or just wanting to live a really, really long time. And I know you kind of yo-yo to a degree without like busting you out, but like you kind of yo-yo a little bit.
I go through phases.
Is that similar for you, or is that more of like a different kind of motivation that keeps you on or off depending? Like, what do you think that affects that for you? Because I know it's important for you to live forever, and food obviously is like
a big
high priority.
Yeah,
but it's also a tough one to like nail down constantly.
If I had perfect discipline, I'd probably eat right all the time. But I don't, which is just something that it's a constant part of the evolution that I'm trying to go through.
Yeah.
But I think the things that factor in are probably schedule, like you say, and unfortunately, probably a little bit of creative work, like how well is my creative work going?
Yeah.
And if it's not going well, if it's going well, I'm able to like whatever fuel I need just to keep the momentum going. But if it's not going well, then things can start to deteriorate.
So if it's not going well, you might make poorer choices for eating.
Yeah.
Based on just like frustration or whatever. Like
a little bit. I think there's also there's some studies that I think have probably been debunked by now to an extent.
Yeah.
That you just have like a limited. You've got like a limited capacity for making good decisions.
Yeah.
And if you exhaust your supply, then you're probably going the next few decisions that you make are just not going to be as forward thinking or as optimal.
Yeah.
I think more recently, people are saying that sort of willpower is less of an economy and more of a muscle. So you can actually train yourself to have more capacity for willpower.
I agree with that.
But that's sort of kind of what factors into it. If I have to use all of my willpower just to try to grind through sort of my software work, then other things might.
You might be a little bit more exhausted when you need that muscle elsewhere.
Yeah.
And for myself too, when I'm eating really, really well, it's my mighty meals, the meals that are in the fridge of the gym. I'll lean on those really hard. It'll be home cooked meals. And it may not be perfect, but at least I know what's in there.
Do you meal plan or do you like cook in advance?
I don't really prep my meals, mostly just because I don't usually have time to like devote an hour to like prepping for another couple of days.
Sure.
But I do cook here a lot, usually in the afternoons or the evenings. Or like whatever Katie makes that may not be like absolutely perfect, but it's better than going out and just getting like to-go food at like Chipotle or like, whatever.
Yeah.
But I do definitely notice a difference in how I feel, how I work, and just like my overall like thought process about life. I'm eating really well.
Okay.
So I try to lean on that as much as I can.
You just believe in the process.
Yeah, but I have kind of refined my bad choices over the years, and it kind of reminded me what you're talking about as far as like it being a muscle, like willpower, And so like probably 2 years ago or 3 years ago, if I was really maxed out schedule wise or stress wise or whatever it may be, like I might be hitting a McDonald's or like Potbellies or like Pop-Tarts or God knows what else, like 7-Eleven, just walking out of there with a bag full of shit,
Yeah.
Just to kind of goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier with like survival, making bad choices. Like sometimes you just got to survive, and I was doing that a lot. So that would be like my low level if I fell off. And I'm not perfect right now, but now I've kind of trained that muscle so that when I fall off, the things that I'm falling off on are really like middle, and they're not like low level stuff. So if I fall off now, it's like a Chipotle bowl or like a Jimmy John's sandwich that's a turkey sandwich. It's not, like I don't know what that meat's made of. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's not like sludge, or, it's not something where I like pull out of the drive-thru and I'm like, dude,
overly processed.
yeah, it's not like the thing where if I pull out of the drive-thru and I'm like, dude, if you get cancer one of these days, it's probably from like the 150 times that you had that shit. You know what I mean? So I don't allow myself to go to that level anymore, which I feel like is a trained thing. Like where you have to ask yourself, like, okay, I can't have the perfect thing now. So what's the best option? That's available to me.
Try to mitigate the damage that
that works in my schedule. So that's the one thing I have figured out. I haven't figured out how to not be as busy, or to like, I don't have a chef and shit. You know what I mean? It's making stuff for me. I can't eat perfect all the time, but that's one thing I figured out is like, all right, if I make a bad choice, it should at least be decent,
Right.
And I don't have to like worry about what it's going to do to me later down the road. I don't want to have any guilt about that. Like if I end up catching like whatever, so be it, but I don't want to have a hand in that shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just, more out of like embarrassment, I think. Like, I don't want to be responsible for that. But yeah, and speaking of too, we were talking about sort of supplements earlier, and we're just talking about now. Like,
you've got that. I've noticed in the gym at the entryway, we've got a new set of products that.
Yeah. So
you're showcasing
at the gym. There's antioxidant supplement now. There's a sleep aid, which is really awesome. And I've told people at the gym about it, but I feel like the sleep aid. Whether it actually happens or not, it feels like it does. To me, that's good enough, but it just feels like it puts you in REM really soon.
Interesting.
And I don't take it a lot. I have it here, and if I get home from jiu-jitsu and I'm kind of wired for the night and I need to go to sleep by 10, and if I just know that I'll lay down until 11 because I just have too much going on, I'll take it. And whenever I take it, I just feel like I woke up the next day and I was in deep sleep for a long time, which is super valuable.
Yeah, I could see making use of that every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't lean on it, to the point where I had to have it to go to sleep. But it's not like a basic melatonin. And the guy that makes that line, all the things that are in his supplements are natural, or it's a nutrient that hasn't been used in a long time in humanity. Like it's something that maybe was used 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, and somehow it just fell off.
Sure.
With our habits or what's available to us to make things with. So he's using...
What's the name of the...
It's called Eternal Nutrition.
Okay.
So it's EAT, like eternalnutrition.com. And he's a jiu-jitsu buddy of mine. And
Eat.
Yeah,
Eternal.
Eat. Yeah,
right.
Eternal. There's antioxidant, sleep aid, and I think there's a hair and nails one, which kind of operates as like a recovery agent to a degree. So if you're not really interested in just like the aesthetic side of what your nails or hair look like I don't really give a shit what my hair looks like. If there's pomade in it, I'm good. But I don't care about like the quality of like the strands of my hair.
Sure.
But you can use it for recovery. And then there's the protein there that's a meal replacement. So, if you can't have a meal and you know that your options are limited, it operates as a protein shake or operates as a meal replacement. And it actually tastes pretty decent for being a very clean protein. It doesn't taste like cookies and cream from GNC, or like I think they have like a Fruity Pebbles protein now, or whatever. But it's pretty solid for what's in there, and that what you're getting in that ingredient list is things that your body needs and nothing else. So so it's eternalnutrition.com. And this has been a really long but awesome podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
No, it's been fantastic. I mean, there's so many things that we didn't even really get to dive into.
Yeah.
But
maybe I can come back another time.
Yeah. So I think we'll have you back on in the future, and I think everyone can expect to see Jess on a regular basis. But yeah, today was a lot of fun, and thanks for kind of schooling us on all of your interests.
What little I know about technology.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll definitely have you back. Thanks.
Looking forward to it.